Welcome back to Dr. Supercoach YouTube for Pigs Round 12 Captaincy Recommendations. So we've hit the first of the mid-season buys, which means we have 4 less teams playing and we need to get our captaincy scores from only 7 games. But it also means we have plenty of loopholes, so you can essentially VC whoever you want. Now just on last week, I once again had the VC on Tristan Cherry. He was on close to 100 at half time and then he came to a screeching halt. He crawled to his 126 and I took that. I was considering whether to roll the dice on Jordan Dawson against West Coast. That was my backup. Jordan also made my video last week, but I decided not to. I wasn't feeling that risky and, it cost me a few points, but I'm not upset with a 126, so absolutely fine with that. This week we have some strong options again, so let's get started. Number 4 vice captain is Darcy Cameron. I'm going to have to tally up the number of times each player has made my video this season compared to last year. I wouldn't be surprised if Darcy is the most improved, as he has made my recommendations plenty of times this year. And this week he slots in again, given the matchup with Hawthorn and Lloyd Meek, who have been giving up on average 7+ points per game to their matchups this season compared to just a general average opponent. So Meek is giving up plenty of points. That actually sits as the 6th easiest in the league. We've recently seen the lower guys like Darcy Fort, Matt Flynn, Mark Blitzarves all well exceed their season averages against Meekie, but also we've seen the big dogs like Witts get 112 and Gorn get a 142, so we've seen some of them take advantage. And Darcy Cameron, he's in great form this year. He's got a season average of 109, and he's just gotten 2 of the hardest matchups out of the way in his last fortnight, so I don't see any reason why he shouldn't pop out another good one this game. And playing in the second game of the round, this is a nice VC option if you own him. Number 3, Dane Zorko. So Dane plays at the Gabba on a Thursday night. That's always a good VC option. In a game against Essendon, who haven't really shown any ability to beat the good teams this season, or really shown much defensive accountability, this could be one of those eye-opening games where Zorko is just allowed to wander freely and do as he pleases. The Bombers are a positive matchup for attacking defenders this season, although interestingly they have been fairly neutral, just middle of the pack for designated kickers. So this one isn't necessarily a recommendation based on data. There's just a gut feel from a disappointed Bombers supporter that we're probably not going to pay Zorko much attention. This is at a ground where he often racks up big disposal numbers. Look, he's got a 3-round average of 128, and he's already got 2 scores over 135 this season at the Gabba, so he can get it done. Number 2, Locky Neil. I was debating which Brisbane midfielders to stick here, and in truth, they all could go well. You know that whenever I recommend one of the Lions mids, I'm probably secretly recommending them all. So if you own a Dunkley or a McCluggage, I think you could happily VC one of these as well. Now, I do have a bit of an inkling that the Bombers will probably send someone to Locky Neil. Whether that's Setterfield, Durham or Caldwell, they've definitely got the cattle to be able to do that. But as a VC option, I just try and ignore the tag risk, as if it doesn't happen, guess what? It's going to be a monster score. So for my actual fallback captaincy option, I will take a tagger into account. But for a VC, not really. You get a second chance. Neil averages over 125 against Essendon for his career. That is easily his most profitable opponent. And he also averages over 120 at the Gabba from 67 career games there. So those are incredible numbers, and I think we'd be silly to ignore them. I know a lot of the community are not able to trust Locky as a captain, given some of the stinkers he's had this year when people have had the C on him. But as a VC option with a monster ceiling, I think they should give him the chance to reward you. And I think that you are going to be sitting on the sunny side of the bus this weekend, Locky Neil owners. But my number 1 VC is Ollie Whitfield. Now, Lockie's role last week was interesting. He was playing a bit more forward. He wasn't taking kick-ins at all. It is a bit of a worry for owners. It's probably enough for me to worry about. I was going to trade him in, and now I'm not really sure. I'll have to probably do a bit more of an assessment on that. But having said that, if last week was just a blip and he returns to full-time defence and gets back on the kick-ins, this could be an absolutely massive score. This could be 150 plus. Therefore, I think it's worth having a ping at with the VC. I wouldn't trust it with the captaincy, just given the unknowns. but they do play early enough in the round, and you will definitely have a blue dot loophole that you can VC Whitfield here and hope he picks it up in defence. Because he comes up against Richmond, who are by far the easiest matchup for defenders this season. They're the number one easiest for designated kickers, they're the number one easiest for attacking defenders, and then the number two easiest for general defenders. I mean, we just saw what Nick Martin did to them last week, and he wasn't playing necessarily a defensive role. Whitfield was kind of doing a little bit of Nick Martin-ness last week, that kind of starting a bit forward but roaming everywhere. Just against Carlton, a tougher team, the score wasn't there as good. But, against Richmond, the equation is simple here. If Whitfield plays his normal role, this is going to be a monster score. If he has moved forward and plays that Nick Martin roaming role, it still might be a good score. It probably just won't be as much. But this is the perfect use of a VC for when someone you're not fully sure about their role, but if things go your way, it could be a monster. This is why that's my number one VC option. And then the pod captaincy option is actually his teammate. And the pod captaincies are back. A solid 128 from English 2 weeks ago, and then that monster 163 from Nick Martin on the weekend. We are heating up here. And Locky Ash is going to keep that ball rolling. This is a guy in only 8% of teams. Despite averaging 111 across the season, he's definitely been disrespected. And I've had a couple of chances to bring him in and have passed up on, a more established player as well. So I'm guilty of it as well. And I just spoke about how the Tigers are the most profitable team for defenders this year. Playing in the backline against the Tigers must feel like the easiest job in footy. This year, they just gave up that 163 to Nick Martin, and they've also given up a 162 to Jack Sinclair. Plus, there's just a mountain of other 110 plus scores against them from defenders, so they are a great matchup. And as I alluded to previously, there was a bit of a game plan shift at GWS last week, and Locky Whitfield kind of moved up the ground a bit further, and as a result, Locky Whitfield took a 0 kick-ins. That allowed Ash to absolutely pig the kick-ins, taking 8 out of a possible 10. That's really big, because Whitfield is the number one kick-in taker at Giants this year, with Ash behind him at number 2. But if Whitfield is out of the picture, even just for one more week, Locky Ash is going to have an absolute field day. So this is shaping up to a big score. And if you're one of the small minority of coaches that own Locky Ash, start licking your lips. Number 5, we're going on the captains now. Number 5 captaincy option is Max Holmes. Holmes definitely deserves his spot on this list with a 3-round average of 113. And that's despite a couple of tough matchups in there. He now comes into a run of easy matches, and I expect him to make my video a few times in the coming month. Now, we don't know whether Bailey Smith will be playing this week. His comments after the game weren't that positive. Said he wouldn't have played unless it was kind of the Bulldogs grudge match or a grand final. But there have been a couple of reports coming out that he's actually tracking pretty well this week. So I'm just going to go ahead and assume he plays until we hear otherwise. But if Bailey Smith doesn't play, this looks even more profitable for Max Holmes. But even if he plays, look, a matchup with West Coast, who are the second easiest opponent for inside midfielders. They've recently given up that 138 to Jordan Dawson last week, a 129 to Christian Petrarca just before that. Playing the last game of the round, Max might not seem like someone that's a safe captaincy option, but giving the Eagles opponent, I'm willing to trust Holmes with the armband this weekend. And like I said, if Bailey Smith plays, I still love Holmes as an option. That's not going to turn me off. But if Bailey Smith misses, I really, really love Max Holmes this weekend, and he would probably jump up some spots in the rankings. Number 4, Jack Sinclair. Jack's another guy on a hot streak. He's averaging 133 over his last 3 games. And little flex, that's right when I traded him in. Well, right now he gets a date with the Demons, who are the 4th easiest matchup for designated kickers this season. Remember those record number of marks I allowed to Geelong earlier in the year? Well, they also allowed a Sicily 121 and a Marek 131 to rack up in recent weeks. Interestingly, they did limit Zorko to a sub-ton just recently, but when I looked into that Zorko game, he still had 27 disposals and 8 marks, and he was the second highest fantasy scorer on the ground. He just didn't convert it into a SuperCoach score. And when I looked at team stats, interestingly, Melbourne are in the top 5 in the league for disposals against, marks against, and kick-ins conceded. So those are 3 things that Jack Sinclair feasts on, and it's how he gets his big scores. So he's coming up against an opponent that will let him do those things. So this is a great matchup for him, and I think he's a really, really safe fullback captaincy option this weekend. Then, number 3, Andy Brayshaw. So this game is also played early enough in the round that you could VC Andy, but unlike the players listed in my VC section, I'd also be willing to trust him as your fullback, so you could use either armband for him. Coming up against Gold Coast, who are the 5th easiest matchup for inside midfielders this season. Interestingly enough, when I looked at the scores against the Suns, they've been giving up the biggest scores to those really strong contested players in recent weeks. So Steele had a 131, Newcomb had a 121, and Libba had a 132. So maybe it might be someone like Sarong benefiting more. But having said that, in that period as well, we still saw a Ed Richards 127, Hugh McCluggage 127, and a Will Ashcroft 130. So maybe they're just giving it up to all types of midfielders. And Brayshaw is the best midfielder across Supercoach this season, and he's looking like a very safe option for his owners again this week. Now, here we go, Bailey Smith. As I said when talking about Max Holmes, we don't know whether Bailey Smith will be playing this week or not, but let's assume he is until we hear anything else. His last 3 scores have netted him 154 and 156 against 2 fairly tough opponents, and then 118 last week against the hardest opponent in the game. So he's had a really tough 3 weeks and he's still averaging monster scores. And now he matches up with the 2nd easiest team for inside midfielders to score against. And if he plays a full game, this could be a real spike score for Bailey. I don't think I need to go in much detail with stats. This one is just as simple as if he flies to Perth and plays, just stick the captaincy on him. If he doesn't, obviously you don't. There is only one player in the league this week that I might consider fading a Basilenka captaincy. I'm just that hot on Bailey Smith if he plays. The only guy that I might fade him for is Max Gorn, because this guy is just so good. Look, Gorn and Cherry have been yo-yoing for the Supercoach scoring title this year, and Max took the lead back with a 153 against Brodie Grundy on the weekend. This week he matches up with Rowan Marshall, who's a positive ruck matchup. We've always known that Rowan isn't much of a hit-out guy. Like, he scores from other aspects of the game. Rowan actually only wins the hit-out in 36% of his ruck contests. That's one of the lower marks for top-tier ruckmen. In fact, only Matt Flynn is performing worse in the hit-out battle for rucks that have averaged over 65 ruck contests per game. So Rowan attends a lot of ruck contests, he just doesn't win the hit-out in many of them. What that means for Max is that he's going to have plenty of free hit-outs available to him. And we only have to look at their matchup last year, which saw Gorn have his season-high 180 points, thanks in large part to 34 hit-outs versus Marshall's 16. So he more than doubled him, dominated in the hit-out battle. Gorn also supplemented that game with 27 disposals and 7 marks. So if you can get close to those numbers again, watch out. So those are my 10 favourite captain options for the week. But as always, here's a bunch of names that didn't quite make the cut. I think they're going to have good weeks. I think you could roll with any of them as your captain for draft leagues. As I mentioned with Locky Neil, I also think Josh Dunkley and Hugh McCluggage, maybe even Will Ashcroft, I think they're all going to have good games. Jared Witts, I think, is going to... I'm assuming it's just Luke Jackson that he's against and not Shrek, but Jared Witts should score really well because that's a great matchup. Noah Anderson as well. Freo have given up points to midfielders, and Gold Coast are at home, so I expect a good Noah Anderson game. I mentioned Brayshaw. I also think Sarong could do well. The Freo defenders as well, because Gold Coast have been giving up a fair bit to those defenders, so Luke Ryan or Jordan Clark could be an option. Then we go on to the GWS game. Oh, yep, there is. GWS and Richmond. I think Kieran Briggs. I don't know. I was someone who traded him in earlier in the year, so I'm a bit jaded about Kieran Briggs. But given the matchup with Nank and Briggs is coming off a good one, maybe he could do all right. Tom Green actually was in my top 10 here. I was going to exclude Bailey Smith because I didn't think he'd be playing, but then I heard news that, maybe he might. So Tom Green unfortunately got the boot, but I still think he's going to have a good week. So he's someone that you could look at. Then in the last game on Saturday, I think Jordan Dawson, midfielder's been going really well against Sydney recently. So Jordan Dawson could have another one. Also, Rory Laird and Mitch Hinge. Sydney have been giving up points to defenders, so that's an option. Then we go into Sunday, and this is just like defender central. Melbourne are giving up big points to defenders, so are St Kilda. So I think all of Bowie, Christian Salem, Stephen May, they could all do well. I've mentioned Jack Sinclair, but also Nasiah Wanganeen-Miller could do really well as well. And then moving on to the last game, I think Geelong are going to destroy the Eagles. I think Max Holmes, as I said, Bailey Smith, but there could be other Geelong players that feast. Tom Stewart, if he plays, I have heard murmurs that he might not. Actually, Mark Blitzarves is the one that has had a really nice run. He's scoring really well because of some favourable matchups, and Matt Flynn is the easiest ruck matchup by far. So if you're picking up Mark Blitzarves off waivers or you've already got him, that actually could be a little cheeky Sunday night C. There we go. Thanks for watching. So I think I'm going to VC Jack Sinclair. We'll see how we go there. I'm debating. I still might trade in Locky Whitfield. I'm not sure. If I trade in Locky Whitfield, I'm definitely VCing him 100%. Otherwise, it might be someone like Jack Sinclair. And then I'll be pretty comfortable with Max Holmes, captain, or Bailey Smith, obviously, if he plays. That's where I'm going. So my VC might be decided by my trades, but definitely one of those Geelong boys for me for a fullback captain because I don't own Max Gorn. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, turn your notifications on so you don't miss this video weekly, and good luck.